right now. Alright, this is the moment of truth after you have watched
Yep.
your obligatory advertisements helping to fund Wiz Nation, or however you want to phrase it. Let's see here. I am the only one in my house tonight, but I'm going to have this video up on the big screen
Yeah.
because, this drive is one of those that you want to have on a big screen if possible.
Yeah, like I would normally have it on multiple screens if I'm at home. This one I'm just using my laptop because, well, I can't really bring a can't really bring a TV outside here.
That's too bad.
But you know what? I have wide open country that I'm looking at in front of me. Actually, I'm looking at a horse farm actually.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah.
You should invite Erica out there.
To Oregon?
Yeah, well, you said horse farms, She's
Yeah.
big into that. She wouldn't give a shit about you or your family. She'd just want to go pet the horses.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's there's plenty of other things too, like hiking, and lots of people go running and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Two-person panel tonight for you. It's yours truly and Doug from GribbleNation.org, who is joining us remotely, and he is joining us on location out in the state of Oregon.
Yep, I'm actually just outside of Salem, Oregon, right now, which is a far cry away from upstate New York.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of wine and beer in both states.
That is true. See, you have Marionberry out that way, so
yes,
you have that going for
which
you.
is a berry and not a mayor here.
Yeah, that's right. So tonight we have another virtual tour episode for you. This is going to be the 21st virtual tour episode that we've done. I did not expect us to get to number 21 this quickly. I didn't expect us to get to number 21, period. But obviously, events in the world the last 2 years have kind of compressed the timeline. So here we are. It's the 21st episode. And this is one that I've been told that I should look into doing for quite some time. Whenever people have heard that I've never been to Oregon, this is one of those drives that people have told me, when you go to Oregon, this is one you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a certain someone who's on this panel has told me that on multiple occasions.
Yes, because I'm a constant visitor to Oregon. My mom's side of the family is actually from the Salem area.
Yeah.
And my grandmother actually lived in Portland during the Great Depression before moving to New York. And on my dad's side of the family, my dad almost took a job actually just outside Hermiston, Oregon, just before he was born. And the reason why he didn't was, well, me.
Yeah, it's your fault.
Yeah, and my twin brother, so.
Yeah. So when I finally got the chance to go out to Oregon in July of 2021, I did so with documenting this drive being one of the principal objectives of the whole trip. The drive on 84 between Portland and the eastern part of the state, by way of the Columbia River Gorge, which quickly became one of my favorite drives in the States, and I think it's not a stretch to say that it's the most beautiful drive I've encountered to this point in the lower 48. And I'll show you the video of this over the next couple of hours, and then you can be the judge of just how wonderful you think this drive is. But it's good to have you
and
with
if
us.
you like this, yeah. And if you like this drive, just wait till you drive I-70 in Colorado and Utah.
Well, I've heard a lot about that one, too.
That's another great one, too.
Yeah. So it's only a matter of time, I think, before I get to that one. So.
Yeah.
Do you want to save all the announcements stuff for when we actually start driving?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the first 20 minutes of this drive aren't all that eventful, so we'll have time to do it then, I would say. The one thing I do want to do is I'm going to bring up the Roadme Calendar real quick, because we did this in December when things were a little bit more hypothetical, but it's the month of March, and that means that road meet season is underway. The first one's coming up in 2 weeks in Mississippi, and then
Natchez.
Natchez, and then as you heard here first in December, there is in fact going to be a meet in early April in the Waterbury, Connecticut area, the first weekend of April.
Yep, and I'll be flying home to host it.
Doug is getting on a plane and flying cross country just so he can host this meet on April 2nd.
Yep, and then it's back to New York to there for me. So
yeah, and then it's all downhill from there. Yep. But yeah, so some interesting additions to the list from last time. You know, we didn't have. You know, we had Outer Banks and we had Cedar Rapids and we had East Chicago. We're adding Lynchburg in June. That's going to be an interesting one. Laura's actually hosting 2 meets on this list. You see Lynchburg in June, and you have Cumberland, Maryland in October. Also, we have revised dates for Harrisburg, PA. We have San Antonio, hopefully in early October. And we have Oklahoma City towards the end of October. So there's a lot happening.
yeah,
It's going to be busy. The only month that's quiet as of now, meet-wise, is July. But since it is July, you never know. Something could change. Somebody might want to host something that month.
yes, I know that there's been other meets that people have been talking about hosting through the years. I think there's one not by me, but in my neck of the woods, they were talking about having one out in Schenectady and Amsterdam, New York area. By another one of the New York road geeks.
Yeah. That's one notable omission here is there is not a meet in New York State planned as of now. But,
yeah.
Well, the
but
year,
it's also early.
Well, yeah, the year is young. Oh, and also that 2-day meet, some jackass you may know is also hosting the meet in Philadelphia the weekend of August 20th and 21st. It's going to be a 2-day marathon of nothing but roads and road enthusiasts, and hopefully they're playing baseball by then. We'll see. If they're not, we're
yeah. I was hoping that they would do something during the week to resolve the lockout, but that didn't happen. So
yeah, well, we'll have to see what happens with that. But anyway, the national meet is that weekend in August. Looking forward to seeing all of you there for that one. All right, so turning our attention now to the matter at hand tonight, you see the drive that we're going to take. This will be a westbound trip on 84 from the area around Hermiston, about 20 miles west of Pendleton, right near the junction with I-82. We'll head west over the course of about 180 miles to downtown Portland, where the interstate reaches its western terminus. And there's a whole lot of beautiful scenery to talk about along the way for that. Questions, comments, profound concerns are welcome over the next couple of minutes before we start the video. Next Saturday's show, you see it here on the screen. Portland webinar. This is going to be a beast. I was actually finishing it up today because the other day I took a look at the PowerPoint just to see how much of it I still had to do, and it was like 20% done. Like I hadn't done anything for it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I need to actually sit down and do this. So I knocked it out over the last 3 days or so. Yeah, this one I always put in the subtitle a comprehensive overview. Well, let me tell you, this one's going to be comprehensive. So.
Well, Portland is it is a very comprehensive city, and there'll be plenty of surprises that you may not have been aware about for Portland. So stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. And you, of course, know about the meet coming up that I'm hosting on the 20th and 21st of this year. So it's only less than 6 months before meet weekend. So book your flights, book your hotels. I actually know people who have already done that. So really looking forward to that weekend. All right. I see someone who has sent in a super chat is already coming up with a contingency plan in case there's no baseball.
And yes, Salem is the state capital of Oregon. I believe it is one of the only state capitol buildings that does not have a traditional dome.
Is that right?
Yeah, it looks like this column, but it doesn't have like a dome. Actually, it's like a gold statue up top, but not necessarily a dome.
Oh, okay. Okay. This video is 2 hours and 22 minutes. It takes us that long to go 180 miles, so we covered this drive at a pretty brisk pace, as only I can. The trip on 84 West starts now. Enjoy the ride. We're going to enter the interstate at exit 180 westbound. Let's see here. Make sure that's maxed out. Okay, good. We are not far from the towns of Hermiston and Umatilla. Pendleton, which is a pretty sizable town, is a short distance east of here.
Yep.
And as we merge onto the Interstate West, we're going to encounter the eastern/southern terminus of Interstate 82. So there's a decent amount that we could talk about right off the bat here.
Yeah, I know. Pendleton is basically known for its woolen mills. Like you may have heard of Pendleton blankets. Basically that comes from Pendleton, Oregon, and I believe they have a big it's a big Western themed town. There's like a rodeo and things like that. I've been there before, and basically you go in and basically see all the statues of the cowboys and things like that. So.
Yeah, and we're not going to see this. We're not going to see this on this drive, but about 35 miles east of here is Dead Man Pass on 84, which is a very interesting drive. If you've never seen that, I've posted video of that on my Facebook page, on the Wiz Facebook page. One of the more interesting. It's not really a mountain pass. It's just a very windy, curvy section of highway where you gain about a couple thousand feet of elevation in a few miles.
Right.
And it's a very interesting drive. Definitely worth seeing if you're in the area.
Yeah, because it's basically the descent into the Columbia River Valley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From there, and it is a very interesting drive. I've done it, but we're in Umatilla County, Oregon. To our right is the old Umatilla Army Depot, and basically, my understanding is that they buried a number of bombs and other armaments in the basically under the ground in the Army Depot. So it's probably live mines. Basically, it was opened initially in 1941 as the Umatilla Army Ordnance Depot, and basically the focus there was to store and supply munitions to the Army, which they did until 1990, and at one point they also stored chemical weapons there. And at one point after it, they did change the name to the Umatilla Chemical Agent Disposal Facility, and the depot was the site of the destruction of the weapons. If you are driving on I-82 towards I-84, you'll see it more. You'll see all these like lumps in the ground, and yeah, that's the old Army depot there. Umatilla, and actually we're going into Morrow County, has a lot of agriculture. It is a pretty arid climate there, but they do have a lot of irrigation because it is pretty close to the Columbia River, and they grow a lot of potatoes and mints and grasses and legumes in the area. And they also have like cattle and other grains and things like that. So you'll see a lot of farms in the area because the land is suitable for farming on there. For I-82, since we passed it earlier, that is the way to the Tri-Cities of Washington. Basically Kennewick, Richland, and Pasco, and then I'll go up towards Yakima, and then up towards Ellensburg, Washington. If you're heading towards Seattle, or there's a way to cut across over to Spokane that way as well. So you'll see that, but see, there's not a whole lot in this stretch of Oregon. It's pretty flat, but it's fairly productive land. So that has that going for it. In Boardman, you'll be passing by Boardman soon, and that was the site of Oregon's first and last coal-fired power plant, and that was built for Portland Gas and Electric during, I think they started opening up in 1977. And what happened was, after 4 decades, they decided to close it because it was actually, even though it was one of Oregon's top power producers, and it produced about 15% of the power for Oregon. It was also the number one point source for carbon dioxide emissions in the state of Oregon. So they actually closed the plant in October of 2020 and dismantled. I think there's a gas-fired plant that they built in its place there. And that, what I was alluding to earlier, this actually, in a slightly different timeline, this would have been the area where I would have grown up. My father almost took a job at that power plant in the late 70s. I think he actually figures a way to springboard to working in a hydroelectric plant, which obviously the power is a lot cleaner. And basically, as I say, like if you're in an industry, you see things. Good and bad. You get like a different perspective, and I think he wanted to get out of the fossil fuel end and get more to hydro. It never happened, for better or for worse. But that was, even in the 70s, that was something. It's like, okay, hydro, would have been a much cleaner environment to be around.
Yeah, and I think the craze for nuclear was still a thing at that time.
Yeah, and he had worked for the Long Island Lighting Company, or LILCO, from the 1960s until 1997 when he had passed away. And one power plant he did not want any part in was the Shoreham, where they were building a nuclear power plant. And I don't think Shoreham ever became operational.
Isn't that the one where they built it and then they sold a lot of rights to it and then they just never activated it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of environmental pushback from the area. And the other thing, too, is, being on eastern Long Island, there's, not many ways of egress.
Right.
So if something were to happen, like a possible 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or something like that, that would have caused a lot of issues because it was, it's not in the best area.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It is interesting how this part of Oregon and the adjoining part of Washington to our north is somewhat of a breadbasket, even though it's in a very arid part of the state.
Yeah.
That is something that we're going to notice as this video progresses. So you should take note of the climate zone that we're in right now, because within about 150 miles we'll be in a completely different looking climate zone. It's like when you traverse the gorge, you go from one extreme to another. I think in the Dalles, I think you get about 15 inches of rain per year on average, whereas in Portland it's, I want to say 35 to 40. I think Albany in the Hudson Valley gets a little bit more rain than Portland, actually. But the rain in Portland, it's like an ongoing mist during the winter, and like a light rain, a light drizzle. They don't get, unless there's an atmospheric river going on, you don't get nearly the amount of big storms that they get back east. And looks like we're going to be passing by US 730, which is the highest numbered U.S. highway. Oh, really? In existence?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and it basically goes along the Columbia River from Boardman through Oregon, Umatilla, then up to US 12 in Washington State. Basically just follows the Columbia River. It's also one of the shortest interstates. The thing is, it used to be... the highest numbered U.S. route used to be just over the Columbia River in Washington State, which was US 830. And that is now Washington, for the most part, at least east of Vancouver, is Washington State Route 14.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that is, just a little, what's we're looking for, esoteric information about the area, basically about the area. I have clinched US 730.
Of course you have.
I did that last July, actually. Finally, that's even though I've taken 84 a few times, that's a part of the state I don't really get to that often. It's like usually when I'm in Oregon, it's Portland, the Willamette Valley, and out towards the coast, because where I'm like where I'm currently sitting, I'm only about an hour away from Lincoln City, Newport, and Tillamook, which is basically on US 101, which is one of the other highways in Oregon you definitely need to make a point in driving at some point in your life, and especially checking out those bridges.
Yeah. Well, that is a project in itself, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see here. I think we
are in Boardman.
Yeah.
Right now, and the other things in Boardman, as I was mentioning, the power plant, but they also have a lot of like food storage and food processing, like Lamb West, in which does a lot of like processing for agriculture, and especially with the potatoes. So there's a lot of potatoes in the area. They have a plant in Boardman. for instance. And actually, at this point, once you get to Boardman, we're getting pretty close to the Columbia River as well, finally.
Yeah, the Columbia River is just to our north. And don't worry if you don't see it yet, because you will see a whole lot of it over the next 150 miles.
You will be in it. You'll be in the river at some point.
Yeah, there will be a point, where you actually are in the river at one juncture, but we'll show you that coming up.
Yeah.
Boardman has a population of about 3,700 by the 2020 census.
Yeah. So what happens with the Columbia River, as you'll notice, is you'll see a lot of basically dams and bridges along the way as well, and that a lot of it's for flood control. I know that, for instance, in the 1960s, I think it was 1964, there was a big flood in Oregon, and this was actually just about 3 years or so after I-84 was built in this part of Oregon, which at the time was I-80N, or I-80 North. Mm-hmm. It was suffixed in interstate because I-80 basically had the I-80N, or I-80 North, which basically went from Utah to Portland, and then eventually, once they decided to get rid of the letter suffixed on many of the interstates, this became I-84, which is also going back to I-82. Why I-82 is north of I-84. Mm-hmm. Because when I-82 was given its number, its southern end was I-80N, or I-80 North.
Yeah, so at the time it was assigned, it fit inside the grid. Which I think I-82 is one of the original interstates in the 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act.
Yes.
So that number was assigned very early, I think as early as 1957, which is around the time that I-80N was legislated. So you're talking about numbers that were assigned in the infancy of the interstate system. And of course the numbers change over the years. But so 82 is an original.
Yep. It wasn't originally an interstate number violation, but over time it became one.
Mm-hmm. Although it is one of the more subtle ones, I would say.
Yes, it is. It's not like I-99 or what was the or I-74 North Carolina, or what's the there was a proposal in Georgia at one point where they were going to build a interstate highway thing from Augusta down to Savannah, and they gave the number of I-3.
I-3. Yep.
Yep.
Which, who knows if that road is ever going to get off the ground, but
right.
We'll see. I actually recorded a podcast episode about another largely hypothetical interstate today, I-14, which exists only as about 25 miles in central Texas, north of... Did I just lose Doug? What just happened? I don't know. You still there, Doug? I don't know. I think I lost him. Well, I was starting to talk about, I don't know. Doug, if you're out there, let me know if you need me to call you back or whatever. Anyway, what I was starting to say was I was recording a podcast episode about I-14, which exists as a very short 25-mile stretch of highway right now, between, I think, it's I-35 in Belton and the area around Fort Hood. Doug just hung up. All right, I'm going to have to call him back. But there is a very grandiose plan to extend that highway all the way across Texas to like Midland at I-20 and as far east as Augusta, Georgia. Most of it is all written into legislation. It just hasn't come to fruition as far as the construction side of it is concerned. And I was going to... Oh, there he is. I knew he'd call back. There he is.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I'm listening, all of a sudden the sound dropped. This is not my normal location, so...
well, this is an undisclosed location, as you like to say.
Yeah, that's because an undisclosed location can be, anywhere.
That's true, too. Well, I'm mentioning undisclosed locations and podcast episodes as a way of leading us into site updates and whatnot. I figured now's a good time to do that.
Yeah, because I noticed that you had mentioned something about I-14 before my call dropped.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of summarized it for the viewers just now, what I was doing with that. Yeah.
And then I know I had done a quick podcast episode, which I released, I think, yesterday. Just a quick, I think, 20 minutes or so on a few roads in Vermont that you should check out.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's not like the main roads like US 4 or Vermont 100. It's basically, there's some unpaved state roads in Vermont, for instance, or you get some east-west roads that go over like the main spine of the Green Mountains and basically get a nice view, and then things from there. Basically, Vermont is such a great state and actually has a lot of different roads to check out. So I figured, why not do something a little basically a little bit different for Vermont. I was obviously a little bit rushed for time this week, so I figured something short and sweet was good for a podcast episode.
Yeah, because I don't think you had done one yet for Vermont, right? I think you've done most of the other states. I realized that I hadn't done that for Vermont, and I was like, I haven't done one for Vermont yet. I'm like, let me get on that. But there's a lot more which I can expand on Vermont at one point. I know that during the Great Depression, there was a proposal. This is, I think we've talked about FDR being a bit of a armchair engineer himself, where he had proposed a Green Mountain Parkway, which would have been kind of like the the Blue Ridge Parkway or something like that. And that actually got shot down by the residents of Vermont. That's something where if you go online, there's a lot of Vermont focused blogs that have articles about that. Oh wow.
Other than that, this week I did a article basically on a covered bridge. Actually, it was also in Vermont and New Hampshire. So I didn't get a lot done, but maybe in March I'll have a little bit of time as the month progresses. I think it is going to be a pretty quiet month for updates, at least on my end.
Yeah, you're a little preoccupied out where you are.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I talked about the podcast stuff I've been working on. I'd like to do an adjoining blog post on I-14. I do have the pictures of the existing highway that I could put together for that. So we'll see if that comes together. Tom and I are still working on the Oahu State Highway system. We're getting towards the finish line with that. I think we have about 5 more to do. And then
and I believe Tom actually posted an article about Hawaii today, or maybe yesterday.
Yeah,
today actually.
Yeah, he's got a new one out right now about former Highway 90. I know he's working on former Highway 66. Hawaii is weird. Like there are state highways that they sign that have not existed for decades. So it's a very confusing place to be sometimes. But my rule is if there's a state highway shield for it, it deserves a blog post. And there happens to be one Hawaii 66 shield in existence also. So we're doing
and I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
So that's kind of how we're approaching it. So we're getting down to the last few there, and then we're going to hopefully put together some sort of capstone webinar about the island. We'll have to see when we can get together to put that together and broadcast that. Maybe that's a project for April. We'll have to see. So that's what's going on the Gribble Nation. And hey, look, the Columbia River.
Yep.
And then I'll quickly summarize the video stuff by saying that we just started the Atlanta metro area this week on the YouTube channel. That'll be going on for the next couple of weeks. We did a couple of premieres earlier today for the 285 loop. We have a couple of premieres coming up tomorrow for each direction of I-16. Tune in. I'll see you then. Okay, Columbia River.
Columbia River, I would say it's one of America's most famous rivers. It's actually named after a boat. So what happened is that I think it was Robert Gray, who was the captain who discovered the Columbia River back in 1793, I think it was, out in Astoria. He had named the River Columbia after his ship, which was the Columbia Red Viva. And that actually was also the United States basis for claims in the Oregon country as far as lands. The Columbia River, of course, basically, traveled by such famous people as Lewis and Clark, and you'll see, like if you're along the Columbia River, you might see signs for like the Lewis and Clark Trail, or they might have like Lewis and Clark interpretive museums or things like that. So other things that you'll see along the way, basically for the Columbia River, a lot of the pioneers that were traveling the Oregon Trail, they would, they would actually, I-84 Oregon followed a lot of the old Oregon Trail, and there are certain places where you might be able to see wagon ruts, especially out near Baker City. There's a museum there, and then you can see like the ruts from the Oregon Trail. But once they would get to Dalles, they would have to either decide to figure out a way to, deal with crossing the Columbia River, which was really dangerous, or there was also toll roads that got them over the Cascades. More recently, with the Columbia River, you have basically a number of dams, basically for flood control and power generation, things like that. That hydroelectric power that I was mentioning earlier. Oregon has 4, I would say, main dams for the Columbia River. Going west to east is the Bonneville Dam. The Dalles Dam, which is right next to the bridge for US 197. The John Day Dam, which was named for the John Day River, which is named for an earlier explorer, trapper by the name of John Day, and his story was a little interesting in of itself. And then you have the Mcnairy Dam, which is upstream. I believe that's also along US 730. Probably the most famous dam along the Columbia River is the Grand Coulee Dam, which is in Washington State, and that's a sight to see. I've been there a couple times to the Grand Coulee Dam, and that is a massive dam. I haven't been able to take a tour of the dam. First time I just went and kind of saw the dam. There's a visitor center, and there's a nice museum there. Second time I didn't get a chance to see the dam because they were not running tours because of COVID. But maybe at some point I'll be able to get to see that. And of course, in the Columbia River goes into British Columbia, where it has its source in the Canadian Rockies. And of course, the major cities along the Columbia River are, I would say, Wenatchee. You have the Tri-Cities, like you have Pasco and Kennewick and Richland. And then you have Portland, which is really more on the Willamette River, although the city limits, of course, go to the Columbia River. And, of course, Vancouver, Washington, the river ends in Astoria, which is where they filmed The Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
And Kindergarten Cop.
Oh, yeah, right.
And they used the Astoria Megler Bridge for a scene in the movie Short Circuit where number 5, the robot, is like crossing the bridge into Oregon.
I've not seen that one. Okay.
That was an 80s movie that I usually have to watch once or twice a year.
See, who knew that Astoria was the home of Hollywood filmmaking?
Yeah. Oh, there's a few other movies there too, but like The Goonies, you could actually see, there's tours where you can actually see some of the different sites in the movie. The Goonies house is in Astoria, although that's off limits now because that was a private home, and the owners got angry over people who basically wanted to see the house because I guess it was really busy. And yes, the rafting part on the Columbia River was the hardest part of the Oregon Trail game. The Barlow Toll Road was much easier on your oxen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how everybody got to know the state of Oregon, was by playing Oregon Trail, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but this is it's a pretty still arid country until you get really past the Dalles, which is, I think we're on exit 85 or something like that. But you'll see a couple of bridges. You'll see the bridge for US 97, which is in Biggs Junction and goes over to Maryhill, Washington. Which on the Washington side there is a replica of Stonehenge. But that bridge was actually not built until 1963. I think they were waiting for the dams to be constructed.
Yeah.
And before that, there was actually before that, US 97 crossed the Columbia River by ferry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see US 97, that bridge in the Dalles.
Yeah, some of these bridges on this part of the river were built in conjunction with the dam projects.
Yes.
I know that's true with the Umatilla Bridge, at least the first span of it. And then I think the Dalles Bridge was the same deal, where it was built in conjunction and in accordance with the agreement that they had to build the dam just upstream of it. Might be one or two other examples of that also on the river, but those are the two that are the most prominent for this episode.
Yeah.
And you also have wind farms in this part of the state, because one of the things that you may not realize from watching this video is that it can be very windy along the Columbia River, especially through the gorge. Like on a normal day, you will have whitecaps in the middle of the river, especially in the area of, say, Hood River out towards the Dalles. It's always a perpetually windy area. And I'm sure you'll see signs on the highway that indicate that as well.
Windsurfers take advantage of that, by the way.
Do that.
Especially around Hood River. You go out during the summer and you'll see windsurfers along the river. Mm-hmm. Right now we're reaching Highway 19 in Oregon, which will actually take you to the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument, which is Oregon has a lot of geologic history, which you may not be aware of. You might know some things, like there were the obviously a lot of volcanoes, Cascade subduction zone, but around, I would say, 33 million years ago or so, there was a change of the climate. Eastern Oregon used to be kind of more of a wet tropical climate. But then over time, I guess the climate had changed pretty drastically. And basically there is a lot of different fossils there. And there's a few different units. I actually wrote an article about that not too long ago, which I'm going to paste to the chat. So you can learn a little bit about the John Day fossil beds. What had happened, how they discovered this, was basically there was basically an expeditions to the area. Basically, people were trying to find gold because there was gold in Eastern Oregon they found. And they were traveling what was called the Dalles Military Road, which went to the Canyon City area, which is near present-day John Day, Oregon. While they were searching for gold, basically they noticed fossils along the way. So they dug up some of the fossils and brought it to the attention of Reverend Thomas Condon, who was a Congregationalist minister of the Dalles, and he was actually also Oregon's first state geologist and the first chair of the geology department of the University of Oregon. Basically, they did that time over time. They realized that, and you can see millions of years of geologic records, basically in the rocks around there. So that's something that is a little different. I actually that's how I spent my 40th birthday. Actually, was going to the John Day fossil beds. There wasn't too much I could do during COVID, but I apparently could do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that is that's something. It is a distance from I-84. It's probably it's a couple hour and a half to 2 hours like south of I-84.
Oh, okay.
Oregon's a pretty big state, but it is something. It definitely interesting to check out if you get the chance. And then from there, another thing is, as I was mentioning earlier, the different dams. You'll see obviously different lakes and different flood control. There was a number of waterfalls along the river as well. Some of them, obviously, at one point carried billions of tons of water, basically after the Ice Age floods from what was called Glacial Lake Missoula through the Columbia River. So you'll see a lot of carvings from there in the rocks, basically. But some of the waterfalls you'll see, one of the main ones that was in the Columbia River, which actually it's still there, but obviously it's under the dams now, under the Dalles Dam, was the Solilo Falls, which was basically it was a name, basically means echo of falling water or sound of water upon the rocks in several Native American languages, and was a tribal fishing area on the Columbia River. So those are things that you'll notice along the way, and it had the oldest continuously inhabited community on the North American continent until 1957, when it was submerged by the construction of the Dalles Dam. So there's a lot of hollowed grounds for a number of different people along the Columbia River, whether it's your westward pioneers or your Native Americans who have spent millennia basically living the lands of the Pacific Northwest.
Should we talk a little bit about the history of the Oregon Trail? Because I know this is probably the part of it that would be most recognized by people.
Yes, we'll talk a little bit about the Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail, basically started in Independence, Missouri, just outside Kansas City, and was a 2,170 mile, basically immigrant trail or wagon route that basically went from the Missouri River Valley to Oregon. Basically went through Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon. And basically that was, the route was laid out by trappers in the, I'd say, basically from 1811 to 1840. And then, basically as the trail got worn, basically you started seeing migrant trains basically going from Missouri to Oregon along the Oregon Trail. A lot of the travel on the Oregon Trail was, really in the 1840s and 1850s. And that was, at the time, basically, people were, land hungry. They wanted to, basically they wanted enough, workable farmland. So a lot of people, what they did, basically the promise of the land, especially in the Willamette Valley, which is, I'm looking at a farm in the Willamette Valley right now, and it is very lush and green.
Yeah, right.
It's literally right in front of me.
Yeah.
But that was the promise, where a lot of people, they basically they wound up going to Oregon City, which is just outside of Portland, and that was basically the destination was really in the Willamette Valley. Of course, basically with that in mind, a lot of people, what they had done with the Oregon Trail, obviously it was over 2,000 miles, took months to travel there, basically through the plains, which at that time I don't think people really knew the value of the Great Plains that we know today. It's actually, and then of course going through the mountains, and at the time, basically they called it the Great American Desert. And of course, basically, once you got to Oregon, basically, it was really following the route of I-84 is how they had built it. So that was, in a nutshell, that's a little bit about that. But yeah, it took months for people to travel, and not everyone survived. And there was the Oregon Trail game where basically you could die of dysentery.
Yes, the Oregon Trail game is based on a true story.
Yes, or cholera.
Yeah. But yeah, so the westward expansion of America in the 1830s and 40s and 50s, of which the Oregon Trail is a part of the story of that, led to the federal government stepping in 1862 and passing the Homestead Act, which basically regulated the settlement of the West. It enabled the government to hand out land on a more orderly basis to potential settlers in exchange for basically tax breaks. So it encouraged settlement to the West, but it ensured that the government was able to regulate that settlement. And that really led to the growth gradually over the ensuing 50 years of the states of Washington and Oregon and Idaho that we know today.
Right. Well, the Oregon Trail was not the only, westward migration trail to Oregon. If you have heard of the Applegate Trail, that was actually an offshoot from the California Trail, where at some point, I think in Nevada, it split off and went and basically up over to Oregon, over to southern Oregon, then up, pretty close to modern day I-5, and ended just outside of Salem, Oregon, in the little town of Rickrell, which is, I'm looking, basically, if I had my binoculars, I'd be able to see it. It's only a few miles away from me.
Okay.
And that was, to settle another, people may have not want to travel the Oregon Trail. They may have wanted a different way to get there. So, you have the Applegate Trail as well. And of course, basically afterwards, people, basically once, the railroads came and basically had the transcontinental railroads, people would travel, across country and move by train, which is, I think, what my ancestors did when they moved to Oregon.
Yeah. Speaking of trains, you can see the Union Pacific line to our right.
Yeah.
And you might see a train along it in the next few miles if you keep your eyes on it.
Yeah.
We are passing through there are many different money shot places along this stretch of the interstate over the next 100 miles. We passed through Blaylock Canyon, which is a great overlook spot a few miles ago. This is Philippi Canyon, where we're passing by right now. And yeah, this is where the real scenic, beautiful part of the drive starts. From here for the next, 90 miles or so, you will be treated to beautiful scenes in any and all directions. So feel free to keep your eyes peeled for interesting things and very beautiful things. Because let me tell you, as somebody who grew up in New York State and did not venture west of the Mississippi until really a few years ago, this is stuff that I had always heard about, but I never imagined that it existed. I had never seen anything like this, This is just an amazing part of the country. Washington, Oregon, the West in general, there's so much stuff out this way, from Colorado on westward, that is just amazing. This country is so beautiful, especially out that way.
Yeah.
I know, Doug, you've been coming out here for many years, so you've seen much more of this area of the country than I have. But
a lot of it has involved cross-country drives.
Yes, it has.
Because my mother drives back to New York once a year, and every so often I'll go with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually given me a lot of opportunity to see things like I-84 in Oregon, which if you like this video, make sure to give it a like.
Hit that thumbs up button, people.
Yes.
We had a I gotta find it. We had a chat comment here from, so Killer's Opinion asked the question, was I-84 built on top of US 30? The answer that I can give you, the short answer to that is sort of. Depends on where.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, this follows the historic US 30 corridor. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. In parts, it replaces it in parts. Parts of it might be under the river at this point, and then once you get west of the Dalles, you'll have the historic Columbia River Highway, which is highly recommended. That is definitely a fun drive if you get the chance to do that. And one thing that I was mentioning this to you before, we started basically, the Columbia River Highway, there's parts of it that are actually converting to a recreational trail. You can go through the old Mitchell Point Tunnel, which if you've seen pictures of, is that tunnel that basically has the windows carved out in rock to the outside. Or there's the Mosier Twin Tunnels, which is been preserved as a bike path. Then you'll see things like the Oneonta Tunnel, which is near the Oneonta Gorge, right near Multnomah Falls. Some of the views I've seen really interesting was the Rowena Crest Viewpoint, which is between Mosier and Rowena. And basically you go to the viewpoint, and then basically you look, and then you basically see the highway below looping. And that's a gorgeous view from there. And of course, basically the road was also built. A lot of the bridges were built during a time when my favorite bridge engineer was running the show in Oregon, Condi McCullough.
Yeah, we should talk about him at some point.
Yes, because he is. If you've seen pictures of the bridges in Oregon, He is he's the main person. You'll see a lot of the bridges. I mean, there's a few other bridges, like in Portland, like the St. John's Bridge, which was built by or designed by David Steinman, and they're around the same time. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the bridges you'll see in Oregon, with like the sweeping arches, were designed by Conde McCullough, who like to add an element of artistry with his designs.
Yeah, so one of the things that he was really brilliant about was taking the reinforced concrete concept for arch construction and adding a real aesthetic beauty to it. Reinforced concrete construction was not new in the 1920s and 30s, but he kind of took all of that and said to himself, well, we can make this look beautiful. Because in the 19 teens and 20s, you were seeing a lot of that kind of construction. Like the example that always comes to mind for me are the railroad viaducts of Northeast Pennsylvania. At Nicholson, Pennsylvania, and Martins Creek, those were the largest reinforced concrete structures on Earth when they were built. Mr. McCullough came in and said, well, I can build bridges just as big as those and make them look 100 times prettier.
Yeah.
And I would say that especially the bridges on US 101 are the ones that he's most known for. Well, there are others as well, but he basically took that concept and turned it into a reality for all those bridges there.
Yeah, like in Oregon City, there's a bridge which is on his design, or another one over in near Redmond, the old Crooked River Bridge, which was part of US 97. That was another one of his bridges as well. But yeah, the US 101 bridges. He was really in Oregon, between 1919 and I think around 1938 or so. He actually took a year off during the 1930s, and also designed a lot of covered bridges, and I think it was Costa Rica or maybe Nicaragua or somewhere in Central America. But other than that, basically he was responsible for a lot of the bridges, or at least the historic bridges that you see in Oregon.
Yeah, I like that cute little bridge in Oregon City.
Yes.
It's kind of like it always reminded me of something like a prototype, for like a bridge that's on US 101. Because I think it was built in the early 20s. So it preceded the much bigger stuff on the Oregon coast by about a decade. So it always struck me that bridge was kind of like a prototype for what he wanted to do out on the coast. I think I have my timing right as far as that's concerned, but
yeah,
that's a very interesting little bridge. It's easy to miss too, but I'm glad that I stopped by to see it.
Yep, and we're crossing the John Day River right now, which is, I was mentioning, it's one of the main rivers in eastern Oregon, and the thing with the John Day River is basically the John Day Bridge is over there. I was mentioning earlier in the virtual tour is that the bridge over the John Day River basically had failed, and basically during the 1964 Christmas flood, which was only a few years after it opened. It actually one person had perished, basically right away as part of the failure or the flooding that destroyed the bridge, and then two others had passed away later on. So that's an unfortunate event in the history of I-84. What I'm going to do is I have a link, and hopefully without all this extra jazz, post that basically so you can just learn a bit about the Christmas floods, and basically how it had it was actually billed as one of the worst floods in the history of Oregon. or the recorded history of Oregon. The Columbia River floods, back, after the Ice Age. That was, or some of the flooding or natural disasters caused by the geologic activity, like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, landslides. That is probably a bit worse, but in modern history, this was one of the worst, and I've posted a link to that in the virtual tour to learn about that. Another thing about the bridges in Oregon is you'll notice that they are a specific tone of green, basically, and the paint color is called ODOT green after the Oregon Department of Transportation. And basically, it's you'll see this basically throughout the state, where they had basically decided to basically paint the color basically to kind of match the evergreens that you'll find around Oregon.
Right. Yeah.
But then you have other things too, where is actually it's a good color that basically protects the seal of the bridges as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, especially the bridges on the coast, because of the very salty marine-like environment. Not just coming from the water itself, but also remember that because of the fog and the mist that often falls there, these bridges are subjected to very harsh environmental elements also.
Yes.
So, yep. Let's see. We passed John Day Dam a few minutes ago. I will just mention about the dam. It was built in 1971. It impounds the Columbia River for a reservoir of about 75 miles long. Officially, that reservoir is known as Lake Umatilla. It has fish ladders. That's something else that we should talk about. Maybe when it comes time to talk about the Bonneville Dam, maybe we should talk about that.
As I have been to the fish ladders in the Bonneville Dam. I remember going out here when my father was alive, and that was one thing. We did a cross-country trip one year when I was growing up, and that was one thing he really wanted to see, because my father was an avid fisherman. It's something he enjoyed doing when he was off the clock. Yeah. And the fish ladders, he was fascinated by them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very important to the local regional ecosystem also. But we'll come back to that, because there's some interesting stuff we could talk about there. The John Day Dam has 16 hydroelectric turbines, each generating upwards of 135 megawatts of electricity. It can generate, the hydroelectric plant at John Day can generate upwards of 8,000 gigawatt hours of electricity. So this is a very significant region of the country from an electricity generation standpoint. You have all the hydroelectric dams along the Columbia, and then as we've seen already, there is a lot of infrastructure in the area devoted to wind power generation. And also there's solar power in the area, so it's a very interesting and very important part of the country for the national electric grid.
Yeah, because
we're coming up on a bridge too.
Yes, that's the bridge for. I think it's the. I want to say it's in Biggs, Oregon. That's the bridge for US 97. And that, as mentioned, was built, I think, in 1963 to replace a ferry that went over the Columbia River. This part of US 7, which goes from Weed, California, through Central Oregon and Washington State to the Canadian border, and then continues as British Columbia Highway 97. And I think at one point they were going to number the Alaska Highway as 97 as well. So 97 is actually a pretty long road, not just in the U.S. It's
I think they were talking about designating US 97 in Alaska, weren't they?
Yes.
As an extension of all of that? Because that is the road that takes you up through BC and up through Yukon up to Alaska. It's 97. It's not 99.
Yes, goes through the Okanagan, which is through Kelowna and over to Kamloops.
Yeah.
And then up to Dawson Creek from there. The name of the bridge for US 97 is the Sam Hill Memorial Bridge, as in what the Sam Hill? No, but that is the name of the bridge, the Sam Hill Memorial Bridge, and that was, as I said before, it's was built, I think, basically in coordination with the Dalles Dam.
Yeah, I guess it would have been in coordination with both of those dams, right? The Dalles is the next one downstream.
Right.
Yeah.
The John Day is upstream, so.
Right. So each of these dams in the sequence that we're passing form their own reservoirs in back of them. And in just about all the cases, the reservoir of the downstream dam comes up to the foot of the next dam upstream.
Right.
It's interesting how they engineered and planned all that from a water control standpoint. It's all one very intricate, interconnected regional system. It's not just dam, reservoir. It's a whole river-wide thing. So it's very important that all that is coordinated properly. Yes, go ahead.
And I-84 was built around the same time as these dams as well.
Yeah, so they would have had to take into account the expected level of the reservoirs and also, all the other stuff that would have changed over the years. With the changing of the water level, with the construction of these dams too. So, I'd say the 50s and 60s was a busy period in this area.
Yeah.
And now we have the modern day, quote-unquote, Oregon Trail with this interstate highway.
Yes. Which is, I think, about 379 miles in Oregon.
Yeah, once
you get to Ontario.
Yeah, once you get east of Pendleton, you're only about halfway across the state. It goes on for a long time after that.
Yeah, and then it basically at that point goes more of a northwest southeast direction. Once you get past Pendleton, basically through LeGrand and Baker City, and then over to along near the Snake River, and then crosses into Idaho around Ontario, Oregon, which is a big potato producing area. Like, I think that's where Ore-Ida potatoes come from.
Okay, yeah. I was surprised to find out that another crop that is grown profusely in that area is onions.
Yes. I think as they have enough water and irrigation that they can do that. I think it's easier than growing like corn or something that might be a little bit more water intensive, but they can do a lot with like more ground crops.
Now let's see, where are we in the video? Oh, we just passed the 1 hour mark. I know this is going to sound a little bit off topic, considering where we are. Let's talk about Mount Hood for a minute.
Oh, yes. That is Oregon's tallest mountain. Is actually an active volcano.
Yeah, so Mount Hood is actually not anywhere near where we are right now, but it is such a prominent mountain that you can see it from literally 100 miles around on a clear day. And if you've been very studious watching this video, you've already been able to see it a couple times. This was not the clearest of mornings when I filmed this. It was a little hazy in the sky, but it still was a little visible at a couple of points, and we are going to see it here in a couple of minutes here as we actually loop out into the Columbia River on this part of the interstate. I know that's something that we alluded to before, but the interstate does actually jut out into the basin itself.
And we're pretty close to where the Deschutes River goes into the Columbia River. The Deschutes River basically goes into basically from the Cascades in Central Oregon, goes through like Bend, which is a big town along there, and basically through like Lake Billy Chinook is a lake around that area. But basically it's basically where the water from the Cascades on the east side of the Cascades goes through Central Oregon, then makes its way to the Columbia River. And that's another important river. A lot of fishing. There's a brewery named after it, the Deschutes Brewery, and I think there's also a county, Deschutes County, as well.
Mm.
And mountains here might look like sand dunes because that's grass.
Oh, really?
Yeah, someone commented in the chats like mountain looks like very tall sand dunes. And they kind of do, but yeah, it's all like grass and dirt pretty much up there.
Yeah.
And it's dry, so it's dry grass.
Right, it's like that desert / savanna grass. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like New York grass.
Yeah, or even the grass that's like 20 feet in front of me.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, yeah, you're on the good side of the Cascades where you are.
Yeah, the wet side of the Cascades.
Right.
I was mentioning earlier, Solilo Dam and there's a little lake, and the Solilo Falls was in this area, which was a big tribal fishing area. I mentioned that earlier. So that is, basically very important. We were mentioning with the fish ladders and everything else earlier, that there's a lot of historical. The Columbia River is, basically in Native American folklore in the area. Basically, plays a prominent role. We'll be passing by later a town, basically when we're through the gorge, called Cascade Locks, which has the Bridge of the Gods, which has 3 different, basically parts to its story. Basically, it's the bridge is a toll bridge, goes from Cascades Lock over to Stevenson, Washington. It's 1,858 feet long, and they actually was built in 1926 at a length of 1,131 feet, and then when they built the Bonneville Dam, they actually extended and raised the bridge to accommodate the lake that was being formed by the dam. Yeah. But the other stories, we're talking about geologic history and landslides, and also the Native American history. On the Native American end of it, there is a legend from the Klickitat people, which is a Native American nation, basically in that area. And the legend speaks of the creation and the destruction of a natural bridge caused by a landslide, which was over the Columbia River, which they also called, the Bridge of the Gods. So that's how they could describe it. So the story goes that the people of the Columbia River had great difficulty crossing the Columbia. So Manito, who was the Great Spirit, was sympathetic and built a land bridge for them. This land bridge was cast in the river when Tahi Sahali, who was a supreme being, became angry with his 2 sons East, which is the Native American name for Mount Hood, and Pato, who was known as Klickitat as well. And they quarreled over the beautiful Luit, who was a guardian of a sacred flame in the land bridge. So the Supreme Being's 2 sons and the girl, who was Luit, crushed in destruction of the bridge, whose debris created the Cascades, and they were resurrected as Mount Hood, or East, Mount Adams, which was Pato, and Mount St. Helens, which was Luit, which you may also be able to see. I know you can see it eastbound, but westbound you might be able to see like Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens as well, which were both in Washington State. And this legend was actually described in a romance novel by Frederick Homer Balch, which was called The Bridge of the Gods, a Romance of Indian Oregon.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Mount Hood, because we're staring at it right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mentioned how prominent Mount Hood is, we're still about, I'd say, almost 50 miles east of the summit from where we are right now. It's one of the more prominent mountain peaks in the West. It's officially got a summit elevation of 11,249 feet. It is famously known as one of those ring of fire volcanoes that Oregon and Washington have a few of.
Like Mount Rainier, the Indian name for is Tahoma.
Yep.
Which is where you get that. You have Mount St. Helens, which basically had a big explosion in 1980. Mount Adams, which is on the Washington side. Mount Baker is also in Washington State. On the Oregon side, you have Mount Jefferson, which is a little bit further south. You have the Three Sisters. And like Mount McLaughlin, which is further south in southern Oregon. Then you have Crater Lake, which was a mountain, basically a volcanic eruption. And the mountain that basically, when it erupted, the mountain was called Mount Mazama. And that erupted and basically caused such a big crater or caldera that basically it formed Crater Lake.
And then I think it's the chain goes as far south as Mount Shasta in California.
Lassen Peak.
Okay.
Which is also in California. Of course, Mount Shasta is part of that as well.
Yeah.
And then it goes into British Columbia. I think the tallest one is, the one up there, I think it's like Mount Garibaldi or something like that. And of course, there's different, once you get into interior British Columbia, there's mountains all over the place.
One thing I will say about Mount Hood to close the subject on that is that the U.S. Geological Survey characterizes it officially as potentially active, but informally the mountain is considered to be dormant. The last significant eruption activity to speak of was about 200 years ago, where there was some minor pyroclastic flow and lava eruption activity, some minor earthquake activity, but there was no major eruption that resulted from that.
Other things about Mount Hood is if you are flying from the east to Portland, your plane is likely to pass right by Mount Hood. So if you basically have the chance, and let's say if you like a window seat, you may want to pick a window seat that gives you a good view of Mount Hood.
Yeah, I was on the other side of the plane when I approached Portland.
Well, you get views of other mountains from there as well. So
right,
it's not a total loss.
No, yeah, it was a very beautiful view of the volcanic mountains in Washington State from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. We are passing the city of the Dalles, which has a population of about 16,000. We also passed the U.S. 197 bridge, the Dalles Bridge, over the Columbia River, and we also passed the Dalles Dam back there.
And then the Dalles Bridge was actually built before the bridge over in Biggs Junction for US 97. So the bridge in the Dalles was actually built in the 1950s, so that actually came first. The Dalles is in Oregon history is actually one of the most prominent cities historically in Oregon. It's not the biggest city; the population is about 16,000. But the name comes from the French word "dalle," which means sluice or dale, or kind of like dale in English. Basically was prominently known for the fur trade, the Oregon Trail. This is usually where they were, deciding whether to kind of stick along the Columbia River or follow the Barlow Toll Road. And then, basically more recently, so obviously the Dalles, as I mentioned, basically the dams, and then Ken Casey's novel. Basically, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was published featuring the narrator Chief, who was from the Dalles. And it was also the site of the first and single largest bioterrorism attack in the United States. which I did not know about this beforehand. It was actually, let me see, it was the 1984 Rajnishi bioterror attack, which basically, 1984, 751 people suffered food poisoning in the Dalles due to the deliberate contamination of salad bars at 10 local restaurants with salmonella.
Oh, boy.
And it was caused by a group of prominent followers of Rajneesh, who basically they were trying to incapacitate the voting population of the city so their own candidates would win the county elections.
Oh, jeez.
That I did not know about until I pulled up the Wikipedia article on the Dalles.
That's an interesting way to try to suppress the vote.
Poison their food.
Yeah, just right. Jeez.
You learn all sorts of things on these virtual tours and webinars. I tell you.
Yeah. You didn't know you'd learn about that tonight, did you?
Yep. The Dalles, another thing. They also have a lot of murals on the buildings around town. So if you like, basically, learning about local history by way of looking at the local murals, you'll be able to see that in Dalles. Another one, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, that has a lot of murals, Toppenish, Washington, which is actually along US 97. Yeah, so you have that. But now we're getting to the point where we're starting to see the Columbia River, the historic Columbia River Highway, which will be to the west of us. Basically, mostly now, basically there's bits and pieces that go from the Dalles out towards Troutdale, which is one of the suburbs of Portland. And that is some of the main sections that you can drive are going to be between Mosier and Rowena, where it's mentioned earlier, the Rowena Crest Viewpoint, which is definitely a sight to see. And then further west, basically you'll see go past Multnomah Falls and Horsetail Falls, Torrella Falls, and then get some nice viewpoints from the Vista House, and I think the other one's the Portland Women's Forum. You get some nice views of the Columbia River Gorge from the old historic Columbia River Highway. That was essentially I-84's predecessor.
Yeah.
And definitely worth driving. I think you actually drove that when you were out here as well.
I ended up driving a piece of it because, not by design, but because there was a huge traffic backup on 84 through the Gorge. Because they were doing construction. They were doing some sort of paving project.
Yeah.
So I happened to see it on the Google Maps traffic page. And there was only one other road in the area that I could get to that would take me around that part of the highway, and it was actually the old highway. So I ended up driving a significant part of it on my way east out of Portland. I ended up doubling back to cover the part of the interstate that I missed, but that was an unexpected little treat.
Yeah. Well, there's talk about actually what they're planning on doing this summer is actually for part of the Columbia River Highway, they're going to have a reservation system like they have at Multnomah Falls already. So basically you sign up and basically you basically pick a date and a time, and basically that you show up during that time. I'm not necessarily in favor of it for the highway, but because a lot of people tourists use it, and a lot of people who want to see the waterfalls use it, it makes sense to kind of alleviate overcrowding and for traffic control. Because let's say if you go on like a summer weekend and you want to see some of the waterfalls along the gorge, basically you may be spending a lot of time finding parking. Yeah, and then the Multnomah Falls, last year they started a reservation system, and that is one of Oregon's, actually I think it's one of the tallest waterfalls in the continental U.S., and that is basically over 600 feet tall, and that is a gorgeous waterfall if you ever get a chance to visit it.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you would place it, but I get the feeling that that's one of the most scenic spots, or like, one of the spots that's always talked about as far as places in Oregon to visit that are of a scenic quality.
Yes, it's probably one of the most prominent, basically places in Oregon that you can visit. There's a thing that's called the Seven Wonders of Oregon, which is basically they kind of highlight different places around the state that you can visit. And you have the Columbia River Gorge, which Multnomah Falls is part of. You have Crater Lake, which is in southern Oregon, which is probably the other big thing that most people, from outside the Pacific Northwest have heard about when they think of Oregon. You have the Oregon coast, which is, the other thing that people would be familiar with. Then you have things like the Painted Hills and Smith Rock and the Wallowas, which are mountains in eastern Oregon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link about that, basically, so you can learn about the seven wonders of the state and basically the tourist end of things, because it is an incredible state to visit.
Yeah, I feel like I've only just scratched the surface of it, because my travels in Oregon were really kept to just I-84 across the northern part of the state, and then the Portland metro area. I didn't make it south of there, but there's so much more of the state to see, and so much more that I hope to see in the coming years. Hey, look, there's a train.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, like I wanted to stop at the Multnomah Falls when I was out that way, and I passed through that area a few times actually. And every time I did, the lot was closed on the interstate, and it was early in the day too. It was like, it wasn't. I mean,
they also have a shuttle that goes there during the summer months. I know that they were running that the past few years, even before the pandemic, from exit 25, which is I think Corbett, Oregon, and basically you take the shuttle and go to the falls from there. That I think is far, because obviously you have. One of the main parking areas for the waterfalls you'll see is right along I-84 in the median. So basically they have to do something for the traffic control. Otherwise, you'll get backups on the freeway because people want to go see the waterfall. I mean, I can't really blame them for wanting to see the waterfall, but it is they've been trying to figure out ways to alleviate traffic on at Multnomah Falls for years.
Yeah, it's so damn beautiful that they have a traffic problem.
Yep. And for me, who likes chasing waterfalls, I've been there a few times. The last time I was there was actually on a Tuesday morning in April.
Wow.
And that was and that even then the lot was pretty busy, but it was not full. So.
Let's see. We're coming up on Hood River at this point. I think we're still a few miles out, but while I'm thinking of it, I'll tell you a little bit about the city of Hood River. It is the county seat of Hood River County. It is named for the river that flows into the Columbia River in the area. Roughly a population of about 8,000. It's also the home of the Hood River Toll Bridge, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes.
And it's also home of the Full Sail Brewery, which is a big brewery, or well-known brewery, especially in the West. You can actually get their beer. I've seen their beer for sale in New York as well. It's the windsurfing capital of the world, which we were alluding to earlier with the wind of the Columbia River. So that is one thing. The other thing with the Hood River Valley is that it's known for its production of apples, pears, and cherries. You'll see if you go south along the there's a scenic by like the Mount Hood Scenic Byway. On Highway 35, you'll pass right past the orchards. That's a nice drive as well. So, so you have that, and the other thing that we're talking about rain in the area, like the Dalles gets about 15 inches of rain a year. Hood River gets about 30 inches of rain a year.
Yeah,
and Cascade Locks, which is to the west, gets about 75 inches of rain because all the rain basically starts hitting the mountains.
Yeah, so all that ocean air goes up the Cascade range and then condenses into clouds, and then it falls as rain right in the Cascades itself. And then by the time the air reaches the Dalles, it's pretty much dried out. So, very interesting weather phenomenon, especially this time of the year. If you watch like the Weather Channel, for instance, and you see the radar and you see, oh, look, it's raining like hell in the Cascades, but there's nothing happening on either side of it, or there's nothing happening east of there. There's this very clear, definitive rain dry line east of the Cascades, and that's why it's because of weather phenomenon and how these atmospheric storms interact with the mountain range.
Yeah, and during the summer months, you can tell which way the wind is coming, because if it's a kind of a cloudy day, the weather's coming from the Pacific, whereas if it's like a dry, hot day, the weather's coming across the Cascades to the Portland, the Willamette Valley.
Yeah, you have a similar wind mountain interaction in Hawaii, for instance. Like the island of Oahu is kind of like a miniature Oregon because it has very similar climate zones, except those are even more extreme because they are so much smaller and the distance between them is so much smaller also. You have leeward and windward sides of the island of Oahu where you go very quickly from desert climates like we saw back 50 miles ago on 84 to a very lush green jungle-like climate on the windward side of the island. All within a few miles of one another. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and then over here, you're starting to see more trees as well along the river, the river, and even the hills as well. So,
I didn't mention. Laura brought up something in the chat. I didn't mention the announcement about season 3 extension nonsense. It's not really nonsense. That's just the first word that came to mind. Sorry, Laura. Do you want to talk about that for a minute, or do you have more stuff you want to say about Hood River?
So let's talk about the extension.
All right. So, yeah, there was a little bit of an announcement thingy that I put on the announcements slide, and I didn't really mention it because I figured we'd save it for the video. The season is officially supposed to end on March 12th, which would be next Saturday. However, I do have plans for more episodes beyond that. The first of these episodes is actually going to take place on March 19th. So, the season that will never end, apparently. And actually, Laura and I are going to co-host this one. It's going to be another virtual tour episode. I'm not sure that I want to actually say what the subject matter of it is going to be at this point. I might save that for next week. But we do
leave them in suspense.
Yeah. Well, I think either way, it'll be a show that people will tune in for and want to check out and that people will like. So there's that show on the 19th. There's also there's a couple other things I'm working on too. I mentioned in passing that Tom and I at Gribble Nation are continuing to work through the the Oahu Island State Highway system out in Hawaii. Maybe we'll start Ohio after we're done with Hawaii. What do you say? And so
Ohio could always use some. Ohio could always use some coverage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Maybe we'll do that. Who knows? So, as Tom and I work through the Hawaii stuff, and as we get to our finish there, we are planning to do a sort of capstone webinar episode on the island as a whole. So we're hoping to do that sometime in March or April. We'll have to see what happens with that. So that's kind of, once we get through the Portland episode on March 12th, that's what I'm looking to do. And then I'm, of course, looking to put PowerPoints together for Atlanta and for the cities in Texas that I covered, Austin and San Antonio, for a potential future broadcast. So it's never quiet here at Wiz HQ. I know that it kind of looks like it can kind of ebb and flow, but there's always something that I'm up to. So
yeah, even if it's behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, that's the same case with you too, Doug. Right? You're always up to something.
Yep. So even, let's say, like I always say, like there's kind of like an updating season, and then there's a like a travel season. So that's why you see a lot more updates that come in the fall and the winter, and then the spring and the summer. Usually, I'm more out and about.
Right. Yeah.
So as you'll start to see on the basically along more the Oregon side, there was a big wildfire about 5 years ago, the Eagle Creek fire, which you'll see a lot of the you'll see some burn scars on the mountains along I-84. That was a fire that took out a lot of natural area around the Columbia River Gorge. That was more so like in the Cascade Locks area and out towards Multnomah Falls. And basically took a lot of popular hiking trails, like there was the Oneonta Gorge, which that was before that fire. That was my bucket list to basically see pictures, and basically you kind of have to do the hike where you're actually walking, you're essentially walking near waist deep up the creek. But the pictures in that that was gorgeous. But unfortunately there was a fire, which was actually caused by two teenagers who were lighting fireworks.
Oh, jeez.
So that's another big thing. Even like in these lush green areas, wildfires are a big concern. Basically in this part of the country.
Yeah, it's becoming an acute problem, and this video was filmed in early July of 2021, so it was before the start of what we would consider to be fire season. But at the time, roughly 10 days before this was filmed, there had been an extreme heat wave in Washington and Oregon. I think the temperature hit as high as 115 degrees in Portland. And people were very concerned, even in early July, about the area being a tinderbox ready to go up. And I think you were in Oregon or this general part of the country, about a week after I was. And you can talk a little bit about what you saw as far as wildfires. Yeah,
so I was in Oregon. I was in Oregon, which I was here for a family reunion, and I think that was the tail end of your trip. But the week after, I went up to the North Cascades National Park in Washington State a few days, basically for a few days after that. And east of the park, there was a fire along Washington State Route 20 that basically was around Winthrop, Washington. And they closed the road. And what wound up happening is I had a hotel reservation for one night. I think it was in Okanagan or Omak, Washington. But what happened was I had to cancel the hotel reservation because there's so few roads that go across the mountains that basically I had to drive down from North Cascades National Park down to US 2 and then cut across over to Stevens Pass and stay Wenatchee. Basically, instead of like an hour drive beyond the mountains, it became like a 5-hour drive. Basically you have that, and that was caused a lot by the heat. You could see, basically, or it was hiking around or going around Washington Pass, you could actually see the smoke in the distance, and it kind of looked like a volcanic eruption. Yeah. Another thing from an earlier trip was actually a couple of years ago. There was a big fire in the little further south in Oregon through the Sandy Dam Canyon area, which is along Oregon State, Route 22, which goes from Salem out towards Bend and over the Sandy Dam Pass. And I had went through there the weekend before Labor Day, and Labor Day weekend. I don't remember the cause of the fire, but there was such a big fire that basically the road was closed for a month and a half. There basically you could see pictures, basically from the sky around like Salem and Albany, Oregon, where basically the sky had turned like this tone of bright orange because of all the smoke, and that was like that for a few days. And by the time I got back into Oregon, so I wound up driving my mom out to New York and back to Oregon, basically towards the end of October, they had just reopened the Highway 22, basically a few days before, and you can drive through like town like Detroit, which is along Route 22. And basically, the town was leveled. Basically, I think the only thing that really made it through the fire was the town's liquor store.
Of course, the liquor store survived.
Yeah, but basically all the natural areas, that's all been. It's all recovering from the wildfire, which basically that's part of the natural cycle of the forest, which is at one point a good thing. But enough on wildfires for now. The area that we're going through right now is, I was mentioning Mitchell Point, which is, if you look at the old pictures of the historic Columbia River Highway, you'll see. Was mentioning a tunnel, basically, and then they had carved out windows in the rock from the tunnel. Oregon Department of Transportation, they're currently converting that into a bike path, and that should be open sometime in 2024.
All right, road meet time.
Yes. Or road bike meet. I don't
Bikey
know, something
wakey.
like that. Yes. That's something I'm not much of. I'm more of a hiker than a biker, but that's something that I would actually want to take a bike on. Might need to lose a few pounds in order to make it a nicer experience, but it is something where basically parts of the old highway I definitely want to check out. If you're going eastbound.
Yeah.
There is a rest area you can actually drive up, and basically you can see where the tunnel was.
Okay, good.
Now you can't really access it westbound, but eastbound you can. And of course, on the eastbound side, you'll also go through a tunnel that was also part of the old historic Columbia Highway.
Yeah, so the eastbound side has the tunnel. Which we're not going to see on this particular drive, but it's one of the only land tunnels on a highway in Oregon, I think, right? I know there's another one on US 26.
No, there's more. There's Route 58, basically through the Willamette Pass. There's a tunnel. There's a few road tunnels along 101 as well.
Okay.
At least those are the ones that I could think of offhand. There's probably a few that I have not driven up. I think there's actually also one in Portland near the Rocky Butte, which actually is part of why I-84 takes kind of that weird convoluted way through Portland. But there's a tunnel that goes up to the Rocky Butte natural area, which is a nice viewpoint where you can see like the mountains to the east. And that's along where 84 and 205 meet.
Oh, okay. Right in that area?
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you look at that on a map, it kind of makes you scratch your head. Like, why in the world do these two highways interact the way that they do? But, yeah. But when you're on the ground, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And 84 was built a lot earlier than 205. And as you might learn next week, there was other plans for 205 through Portland, and there are other plans to straighten out 84 as well. You know, the Mount Hood Freeway. There's another freeway that they're planning along Northeast Fremont Street at one point as well.
Yeah. All to be talked about on the Portland webinar, so don't miss it.
Yes.
Let's see. We're not far away from Bonneville at this point, so I will start off with the Bonneville Dam portion of the discussion by saying that it was built in the 1930s. At the time of its construction in the 1930s, it was the largest water impoundment project of its type in the nation. Of course, I believe this was the first of the big dams to be built on the river. And of course, the Columbia River has a long history of flooding, catastrophic flooding even. And so the U.S. Army Corps really pinpointed the Columbia River Basin as a major point of interest for their flood control program. Of course, they also did this for other rivers across the country, famously the Colorado River, also the Tennessee River with the Tennessee Valley Authority. But the Columbia Basin was one that they focused on primarily. The Bonneville Dam was gradually fitted out with powerhouses in the ensuing decades, from the 30s right on up through the early 1980s. The dam itself has a length of almost half a mile, about 2,700 feet. It stands 170 feet tall. The dam itself is capable of producing 4,500 gigawatt hours of electricity annually. And also, we should talk about the fish hatcheries at the Bonneville Dam.
Yes.
Also. So, go ahead.
Yeah, with the fish hatcheries and the fish ladders, as if you know anything about like salmon or what have you, they travel upstream to spawn. Essentially, where they where they were, basically, where they were born, essentially. So the fish ladders, basically, you can see like the fish. If there wasn't a fish ladder there, basically, you can see like fish that are like trying to like jump up waterfalls and things like that. So the fish ladder basically serves as a way for the fish to do their, basically have that part of the life cycle. So they, they'll jump up the fish ladder. So what happens is that at the Bonneville fish ladder, basically this is something you can actually visit. The fish ladder was for each fish ladder that they have is 40 feet wide, and it has it circles from a lower water level to a higher level every 16 feet. There are 6-foot high barriers to regulate the pools, so that basically the fish, they can jump up. And with each partition that's submerged, there's 2 feet square partitions that the fish can swim. So the fish locks, they operate like the navigational locks, basically the water being entered from the bottom. So in operation, the entrance gate first is opened, and a moderate quantity of water is admitted through the bottom of the chamber, flows out through the entrance gate to attract fish into the chamber. The entrance gate then is closed, and the chamber is filled by water admitted through the bottom. The exit gate then is opened, permitting the fish to escape to the river above the dam. A submerged grill that slopes downward towards the exit gate may be slowly raised beneath the fish to urge them towards the exit and assure their departure. The exit gate is then closed and the lift chamber is drained, and the entrance gate is then opened for the commencement of a second cycle. The fish locks are provided in pairs in order for one chamber may always be open for the entry of fish. And this is something that they had built as part of that Bonneville Dam, or sometimes they call them fishways. The original design of the Bonneville Dam included 3 locations of fishways, each on one end of the spillway dam. And basically it's like on the north side of the Columbia River, and then one on the powerhouse on the Oregon side. You can actually visit these fish ladders at the Bonneville Dam, so you can actually check that out. If you're going through the area, it's neat to see. Another place where you can see fish ladders is I think it's on the Union. It was over in Seattle. I think it was at the Union Ship Canal or something like that. up there. You can also see the fish ladders there, and of course other places along the Columbia River as well. You can see the fish ladders as well in operation. So,
yeah, some really interesting stuff. And I paid a visit to the fish hatchery at the Bonneville Dam as part of this trip also, and it's unique. You don't. This is another one of these little things that you don't really see out east. So it was an interesting experience. But yeah, the Bonneville Dam as an engineering achievement is amazing. It's one of the larger dams in America as far as its volume and also its electrical generating capacity. So if you're an engineer and you like that stuff, be sure to check that out on your way across US 30 or I-84. Here is the town of Cascade Locks, which I think is where the Bridge of the Gods segment of the commentary takes off.
yes. So I mentioned part of it earlier with the story of the Klickitat and basically Y East and Lewitt. So the natural part of the thing was the Bonneville landslide. So basically the land bridges I was mentioning. So the Bridge of the Gods derives its name from a much larger Bridge of the Gods that covered a part of the Columbia River with estimates ranging from a few hundred years ago to almost 1,000 years ago. The earlier land bridge was a blockage that was caused by the Bonneville landslide, which basically came from the southern escarpment of the 3,400 17-foot high Table Mountain on the Washington state side of the river and cascaded down towards the Columbia River, which buried the valley with more than 5 square miles of debris up to 400 feet thick. After blockage by the Bonneville landslide, the Columbia River formed a great lake behind the debris dam, perhaps 300 feet and extending as far as the Wallula Gap, which is about 170 miles upstream. So this land bridge or landslide caused a lot of water backup upstream. The Columbia River eventually topped over the southern edge of the landslide, forming the Cascade Rapids, also known as the Cascades of the Columbia. It was a set of rocky rapids which descended more than 22 feet over about 600 yards, and then another 30 feet over the next 8 miles. The rapids are remnant debris of the landslide dam. The rapids were first mapped by Lewis and Clark during their expedition, and it was said that the name of the mountain range Cascades comes from this natural dam caused by the Bonneville landslide. The 1896 completion of the Cascade Locks and Canal finally permitted uninterrupted navigation along the Columbia River between the Dalles and the Pacific coast. The constricted river valley at the downstream end of the landslide provided an obvious location for the construction of the Bonneville Dam, and at the upstream end of the landslide for the modern-day version of the Bridge of the Gods.
Yeah, so the bridge, the modern-day steel bridge that we see today is named for the Native American legend that they call the Bridge of the Gods, which is basically that landslide that occurred. It's not exactly clear when the slide would have occurred. It definitely took place before the arrival of Western settlers. There is some evidence that suggests that it may have happened around the year 1450, which is also in accordance and in parallel with a similarly sized event on the Cascadia subduction zone. So there may be a link there between the two. It would have taken a massive earthquake to jar that much material loose, and Cascadia is a prime candidate to unleash such a large event. So there is a potential link there between Cascadia and the Bridge of the Gods. Of course, the earthquake that is most associated with Cascadia took place around the year 1700. That was an earthquake roughly magnitude 9.2 on the Richter scale, based on tsunami deposits and other things that they can track.
Yeah.
So this is definitely earthquake country, even though it doesn't happen very often. Some of the largest earthquakes ever imaginable on the planet can happen here.
Yep, and the other thing is how they kind of link together. When the 1700 earthquake came, there was a legend in Japan, basically about a tsunami that happened, and they didn't. There was no associated earthquake, at least on the Japanese side of the Pacific.
Yeah.
And basically, they matched it up with basically the geologic and basically research that was done here. With like the various fauna, flora rather, and they kind of linked, basically a date of January 26, 1700.
Yeah, because that's, it took the tsunami probably 8 or 10 hours to go across the Pacific Ocean, but and of course the Japanese would not have felt an earthquake, so yeah, it makes perfect sense. So.
Yep. So that is, and the other thing with that is that it's said that the Pacific Northwest, infrastructure-wise, is woefully unprepared for the big one, so to speak.
Yeah, well, we kind of talked about that when we were talking about Seattle, and how sort of the revealing of the fact of just how vulnerable Seattle was instrumental in the replacement of some of their infrastructure, like the Alaskan Way Viaduct. But yeah, Portland is in the same boat as far as that's concerned. They are in the same seismic zone that Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia are in. The danger to those cities, because they are relatively inland, is less with the tsunami, and it's more with the actual earthquake itself. So, yeah, there are definitely major concerns. And when we talk about the bridges of Portland, we'll probably have some time to dive into some of the seismic stuff. So, on some of these bridges, like the Fremont Bridge and the Markham Bridge, they actually have some really interesting earthquake engineering devices built into them. That'll be worth discussing at some point. You wouldn't necessarily think of Portland, Oregon as being a hub for earthquake engineering, but that is becoming the case.
Yep, and I think that basically as more research has been done, they've realized that basically they've had to build or basically retrofit basically various infrastructure buildings and etc. for to withstand an earthquake. Although a lot of the older buildings are essentially toast.
Yeah, I mean it's a very difficult situation, right? Because you ultimately want to make every building as safe as you can, but also with a lot of these older buildings that are subject to historic landmark status, or they're subject to, or in general, it's just very difficult to retrofit buildings like that. It's much better to start from scratch.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can do with a lot of those like row house type buildings and the brick and the masonry buildings, and so those are the ones that are obviously going to be the most vulnerable in a major earthquake. Let's see here. Exit 35, so that means that we're 35 miles from downtown Portland. One of the things that's really interesting about this drive too, and I'm reminding myself of it right now, is that most of the approach to Metro Portland is very unassuming. We're 35 miles out from a downtown that is the center of a metro area of about 2.5 million people, but you would not know that you're approaching a major downtown for the most part. Not, at least not until you enter, say, Gresham, which is about 15 or 20 miles out, do you realize that you're starting to enter civilization again.
Yeah, and you'll see that a lot, with some of the western interstates. Like I-8 going into San Diego is like that too. Yeah,
I-8 is really a fascinating drive. I know I've brought this up many times in the past, but 8 is an amazing drive. 8, you actually kind of know you're entering San Diego because about 40 miles out, you can see it from the top of the mountain. You can see the Pacific Ocean when you're up on the heights up that way. That's one of the most spectacular views on the whole interstate system.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have that luxury going to Portland on I-84, but basically you still have, obviously, as we're looking here, plenty of scenery along the way.
Yeah, so when you consider how mountainous the drive has been the last hour or so, the interstate has been, and of course the Columbia River next door, has been always relatively close to sea level, like within a couple 100 feet, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say so. I know that the Willamette Valley, for instance, is only a few 100 feet above sea level.
Yeah, so the Columbia River Basin through this area, of course, with the rapids and now the dams, changing the level of the river, it varies quite a bit. But the Columbia River, especially now as we near Portland, is just about near sea level. So it's interesting to see just how, the terrain just towers above everything else, and yet here we are, we're not actually like in a mountainous area in terms of the elevation that we're sitting at. We're actually at the datum level, whereas everything happening around us is, thousands of feet to one direction.
Yep. So, here, as I was mentioning, the other thing too is, we're approaching Multnomah Falls, which I know that we went over earlier as well, but you'll start to see it around. This exit 31 is going to be the exit for Multnomah Falls. That is, as you'll start to see, that's a left exit because basically the parking lot is in the median.
Yes, and the lot is closed because a lot of people like to chase that waterfall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the more famous, we were talking about how famous it is as a natural site, but it's also got one of the most famous photo op spots for bridges, which is a very beautiful arch bridge that cuts right in front of the falls there, and there's a nice spot that people go to get pictures of that. You've probably seen that online for, many years.
I've seen that through my own camera.
No, I'm sure you have, yeah. Yeah, but every once in a while in certain Facebook groups I administer, I always see pictures of that bridge right in front of the falls there.
Yeah. So you have that, and then over on the east side, not east side, like over closer to the river, you'll also see things like coming like Rooster Rock, and you have on the Washington State side you have Beacon Rock, which are natural landmarks that Lewis and Clark basically they gave names to as well. So you'll see a lot of different things that are named by the OGs, Lewis and Clark. The other thing too about mountains, basically like Mount Hood and Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens. I was mentioning earlier that the Columbia River is named after the boat, basically Captain Robert Gray's boat, but Captain George Vancouver, who was British, who basically, he lends his name to obviously Vancouver, British Columbia, and also in Washington you'll have Vancouver, Washington, and Fort Vancouver. He named the mountains after like people people serving with him on his ship. Yeah, so you have some British influence in some of these names as well, basically on who explored and who named things first. So, and then other things with since we're in the Columbia River Gorge area, and I was mentioning that there's a number of waterfalls. Obviously, Multnomah's most famous. You also have Horsetail Falls, which is a few miles east of Multnomah Falls, but to the west you have Wakena Falls, you have Fairy Falls, you have Mist Falls, you have Bridal Veil Falls, you have Shepherd's Dell, you have La Torrelle Falls, you have the Vista House, is what I was mentioning, the Portland Women's Forum, basically, which is a scenic area. You also have, if you go, hike a little bit further, you have the Angels Rest Lookout. You have Fairy Falls. You have there's a mountain that I have been to a few times called Larch Mountain, which you get and then there's a place called Sherrard Point, which you get a nice view of the mountains to the east as well. So there's a whole lot of recreational activities to explore if you're basically along the Columbia River here.
Oh yeah, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. And I'd say that some of my favorite one, obviously Multnomah Falls, but I also like La Torrella Falls as well, and they're all you can see like the water cascading, and there's a lot of basalt rock here from the volcano, so it's a little different experience, from what you see in Oregon as opposed to waterfalls, in other parts of the country. Because the terrain kind of dictates, basically the appearance around them.
Yeah, we're coming up on Rooster Rock, which I think you mentioned before.
Yeah, a little while earlier. So Rooster Rock's a state park, and that is basically it's a river. It has a 200-foot stone pinnacle, which is I said these are names that basically people came before us look for that. So, and that's the big thing with the Rooster Rock is that basically was named after it's a big stone 200-foot stone pinnacle that goes in from the basically in from the along the river, and then soon we'll be passing by the Sandy River, which is after you pass the Sandy River, that's pretty much where the suburbs begin over in Troutdale area. So we'll be coming across that in a few miles as well. If you want to see different viewpoints or different things in the area, let's say if you want to see Mount Hood, there's a viewpoint down near Sandy, which is the Johnsrud viewpoint, which basically you get if it's a clear day and basically the light's favorable, you get an incredible view of Mount Hood. Sandy, Oregon, if you've ever seen the show Gold Rush, which is I think it's on the Discovery Channel, the Hoffman crew, like Todd Hoffman, who says things like "frickin" a lot, they're from Sandy, Oregon. Yeah, so that is basically kind of Sandy's claim to fame is basically a I'm not even sure if he's a very good gold miner. At least that was the appearance that I would get on the from the TV show. And actually has another show, Hoffman Family Gold, now apparently that's coming about. Well, he also has a production company too. So basically, he does a lot with that. So that is kind of the claim to fame basically for Sandy is this miner. I always liked his father Jack, who was kind of this old miner who was I think it was in his 80s, and he was mining with the crew on the show, and basically it's kind of like the old you see pictures of like old gold miners, and this guy's like white hair and like a long white beard. Mm-hmm. That was his father, Jack Hoffman. Basically gave that appearance because he has white hair and a white beard.
Nice.
Yeah, so that is so that's where we're coming over. But before we get into Sandy, there's the town of Corbett, which is another thing. Another thing in the area is the North American Bigfoot Center, which is obviously Bigfoot.
Yeah,
it's actually a few miles south of I-84. So you have that, and then So we're starting to get into Portland.
Yeah, 22 miles to downtown. And again, no sign of any real suburbia at this point. 100 miles ago, we were in a very arid, desert-like climate. And now you see that we're in a completely different climate zone.
Yeah.
As we've crossed to the other side of the Cascades.
It's more of an oceanic / Mediterranean climate. And I think basically it, has, it's more oceanic. Basically, it's, the climate that you get more like England or, France or what have you. But the Mediterranean part is because it doesn't really rain much during the summer months. And basically most of the rain that you see in Oregon is essentially from October to May. But of course, the other saying that they have in the Pacific Northwest is that summer starts on July 5th. Because it's still kind of cloudy until July, and then July and August, it just doesn't rain that much.
Right, yeah. Although there is that persistent marine layer, at least the first half of the day, I found.
Yeah.
Which was true in most of the days I was in Portland, and it was true on the couple of days I was in Seattle also. It was early July. And the sun does come out in these cities. It's just, it's
you gotta wait a while.
Yeah, you gotta be patient if you want to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, so that's, basically, that's what they say, like Seattle, for instance, basically is known for its gray weather. Portland, yes, but not basically. But when you think like gray, cloudy days, you think of Seattle before Portland, I would say. Mm. Even though Syracuse has more rain and more clouds than Seattle.
Is that right?
Yeah. But I think Seattle being a bigger city, and of course, because it is, at least during the first part of the day, it's a little cloudier before like the clouds burn off. Yeah, that's what you get is a very basically that basically reputation of being a pretty cloudy place to be.
Mm-hmm. Here's Lewis and Clark State Park at exit 18. Still no suburbia at mile 18. It's coming up.
Speaking of Lewis and Clark, basically, they were pretty much, they were, exploring from 1804 to 1806. Pretty much by the time they got back to what was civilization at the time, which was St. Louis, pretty much they were pretty much thought of as dead. Because everyone's like, oh, they never came back. But pretty much, they didn't think that they were still there because it took so long for them to get back. But that's also, how vast the West is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we take that for granted, right? Because we have the interstate system today, and of course we can get on a plane and go anywhere that we want to. But 150 years ago, it was kind of flip of a coin if you were even going to make it to one side or the other.
Yeah. Imagine walking across all this land, too.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, look, we have suburbia finally.
Yeah.
We picked up a third travel lane. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Portland Metro. We'll talk about this in a lot more detail on the Portland webinar. But the city of Portland itself has a population of about 650,000 per the 2020 census. The surrounding Portland metro area has a population of about 2.5 million. It's also noteworthy in that about 47% of Oregon's entire statewide population resides within the Portland metro area, surrounded by the Willamette River Valley and the Columbia River area. Portland, as I said, is the largest city in Oregon.
It's the Rose City.
It is known as the Rose City. That's right.
Yep. And if you go, basically, there's, like one of the big places that people go to, tourist-wise in Portland, is the Rose Gardens.
Yeah.
over in the Washington Park. There's other cities around Oregon, like Corvallis. They have their own rose garden as well. But like Portland, obviously, is the big one.
Yeah. So we're now in
It's also
Metro.
Yep.
So
it's also It's also nicknamed Stumptown.
I don't know where that comes from.
Or if you follow basketball, Rip City.
Yeah,
Portland.
I am familiar with that one. Yep.
Yeah. And of course, you'll learn more about it next weekend.
That's right. We'll have unlimited time to talk about the Portland Trailblazers and the Mount Hood Freeway, among God knows what else that's going to come up.
Yep. There may even be a discussion of America's least favorite planner.
He has a way of popping up in all of these cities at some point or another, doesn't he?
Yes.
He tends to...
Yeah.
He was a busy guy.
Yeah.
Robert Moses probably did not take a day off his entire career.
Nor did he drive.
That is true. Yeah, most people don't know that, but he never learned how to drive. This guy who was prolific about planning highways and whatnot never actually learned to drive himself.
Well, he probably didn't need to drive. He had a chauffeur.
Well, that's true. I think the same was true with FDR, right? Although I think with him it was more of out of necessity than...
At least later on, after he contracted polio. But I think I would say in the early days he may have driven a little bit. Of course, that would have been when roads were basically the good road movements where they're still trying to figure out roads, I guess.
Right. Yeah. He could have paid the toll on the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway at some point or another.
He could have, yeah.
That probably was the only major paved road he would have had the opportunity to drive.
And he wasn't that far, so...
Yeah.
It was, basically wasn't that far from his cousin Teddy's house at Sagamore Hill.
That's right.
And I remember I was growing up, and we took a lot of field trips to Sagamore Hill.
Oh, did you?
In Oyster Bay, yeah. Well, that's basically it's the historic place where basically the historic place on Long Island, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that would be the one that most people would know about.
Yep.
So 84 through this stretch, we're running east to west across the suburbs along the Columbia River of Gresham, and we're going to enter the city of Portland coming up here. Coming up on the interchange with I-205, which is the eastern bypass around Portland. It also serves the eastern suburb communities in Oregon and Washington State, east of Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah, like Clackamas and Oregon City and what have you.
Yeah.
But as I had alluded to earlier, basically the routing of 84 through Portland, basically is, I'm going to say more of an older, basically is built earlier, so known as the Banfield Freeway in Portland, and that is named after, I think it was like the official name is T.H. Banfield Freeway, and that is in Portland. Basically, it is, you have the Max light rail that basically goes alongside the highway. You'll be able to see that along 84 there. And what happens is, basically from 205, basically the highway dips to the south. It actually avoids the Rocky Butte natural area, which, there's a nice viewpoint, basically that goes, basically you can see from there. Of course, you also have Portland International Airport, or PDX, to the right of 205 here nearby, and of course Portland PDX is known for its most probably the most distinctive carpeted an airport anywhere. Basically, kind of a very unique design, and the locals when they when the carpet was replaced and there's a different design put on, the locals kind of revolted about that. They grew attached to their carpet, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess it never occurred to me, but yeah, thinking back on it, the carpeting in that airport, in the concourses and in the gate areas was very unique from any. You don't see that kind of thing in airports across America. That seems to be something that is unique to Portland.
And it's going through a multi-year renovation right now. But other things, basically about I-84 through Portland, basically it's known officially as the T.H. Banfield Expressway, even though everyone just calls it, it might be called like the Banfield Freeway and local lingo. It goes through an old railroad grade, and it travels northeast through Sullivan's Gulch, which is, the other, the Rocky Butte. And then basically you'll have like different, obviously different interchanges for it. You'll have goes through different neighborhoods like Kearns, Hollywood, North Tabor, Madison South, while following the meandering gulch. Tabor, Mount Tabor in Portland, you may be able to see that Mount Tabor is the one of the only cities in the United States where there is it's an extinct volcano this time, but there is a volcano within the city limits. Bend, Oregon is another one, Rocky Butte in Bend, Oregon, but Portland's Mount Tabor. There's go up to the summit there and get a nice view of downtown Portland if you're looking westwards downtown Portland. Eastbound, if you want to get great views of Portland, you go to like the Pittock Mansion, which was owned by a gentleman who owned the Oregonian, which was the local newspaper, which still is a local newspaper there. But you can see here, basically to the right of I-84, you'll see the light rail, which is the MAX line, which Portland has geared more towards the light rail as far as more modern corridors, as opposed to building more freeways, and that's another discussion for probably next weekend.
Oh, I'm sure it will come up, yeah. I think this particular line that we're seeing on the right connects downtown with the airport.
Yeah. I believe that's the red line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you also have the green line, which follows 205 down to the Clackamas Town Center, where they have a JCPenney. And then you also have other lines basically go up towards like Washington, basically out towards, to the west towards Beaverton and what have you. I know one of the times I flew out here, I actually met up with my mother at I took the green line down to Clackamas Town Center instead of her picking me up at the airport. So I've been on the light rail in Portland. I haven't really been in the line along I-84, although that would be an interesting way to go, I would think. Yeah, and in certain times of the day, if there's rush hour, it might actually be preferable.
Yeah, well, so as you might gather from the roadway that we're traveling right now, this is a very early interstate era design for this roadway. It was conceived right after World War II and built originally as a relocation of U.S. Route 30. It was not intended long-term to be the home of an interstate highway, but the original highway, the original alignment of Interstate 80N, as it was known at that point, was meant to follow a separate highway paralleling it to the south, which was known as the Mount Hood Freeway.
And that has an interesting story.
It sure does, and we'll talk more about it next week, but the idea was to bring I-80N into downtown Portland along the Mount Hood Freeway to the south, which would have tied into the eastern/northern end of the Markham Bridge directly. In fact, when the Markham Bridge was built, there were stubs built into it to account for the future Mount Hood Freeway construction leading east from the bridge. Some of that space has been repurposed, so it's a lot less obvious to tell that there was a planned freeway there, but you can still see little hints of things at that particular spot.
Yep. And I was mentioning too, there was another freeway that was planned along Northeast Fremont Street, which could have tied in with I-84, basically near where it meets 205 today.
Yeah.
So that was another option as well. But the Mount Hood Freeway was the better known, basically a possible alignment of I-84 through town.
Yeah, and like most cities in the 1960s and 70s, Portland had its own set of freeway revolts. And of course, one of the freeways that was a direct casualty of that was the Mount Hood Freeway. Also, the Rose City Freeway, which was intended to connect the north end of the Fremont Bridge with Portland Airport.
Yep, that was the other one I was mentioning.
Yep, and so you find a similar pattern in all of these major cities. Early freeway construction followed by freeway revolts, and then a move gradually over the years towards transit options, and Portland is no exception to that.
And the transit is very very well used here.
Yeah, I think that Portland's transit system is not as developed as, say, Seattle's is. Seattle's been very aggressive about building new transit. And Portland has been building new stuff as well, but I would say that their system is not quite as developed, but still, they have very significant ridership numbers on their light rail system.
Yeah.
Well, I-84 reaches its western terminus in the next mile as we enter downtown Portland.
Or as we kind of crawl towards downtown Portland.
Yeah, this is one of those highways that's kind of like, I would describe this as the Cross Bronx of Portland, this stretch of the Banfield Freeway. There just isn't any way to expand the road to add new lanes. I think they worked on a pilot program for HOV lanes along here once upon a time that ultimately didn't go anywhere because A, nobody used them properly, and B, the Portland Metro Police were not willing to enforce them.
Right.
So that idea didn't last very long. But really the only major significant construction along this corridor meant to try to alleviate congestion has been the construction of the light rail system.
Yeah. And, the other thing, too, is, basically with, let's say, basically, one thing, basically, if you're, like, sometimes I'll fly into Portland and it'll be late at night and take 84 into Portland. At night, it's a very nice drive into downtown. Then basically you get to, basically once you go to I-5, you get to see all the bridges across the Willamette River, and it's a very nice drive at night.
Yeah, I actually was never in Portland after dark on this trip. I was out in the burbs or I was elsewhere at that point. But, so that's one experience I didn't get to have. But we've made the transition, so I-84 comes to its end there, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes of bonus coverage of I-5 along the east bank of the Willamette River. As we start to wrap this show up, I'd like to thank Doug for joining us live on location in the state of Oregon.
Which doesn't normally happen.
No, he did not fly out to Oregon with the purpose of broadcasting from there, I assure you.
I'll tell it, basically at a family matter, my mother's actually recuperating from a hip replacement surgery, so that's why I'm out here to help her. She's can do most of her functions, fortunately, at this point, but, there are certain things that, I was willing to, basically I was able to, come out and help out with, so.
Yeah. Well, you're very fortunate also that your employer lets you work from home, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that helps.
Yeah.
As we cross the lower deck of the Markham Bridge, I will say thank you to everybody who watched this episode tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any last-minute comments, questions for Doug and I that you would like addressed, now's a good time to leave them in the chat because we'll be closing up shop here in a couple of minutes. I have to say, just to kind of tease what we're going to talk about next week as far as Portland is concerned, one of the nicknames that I've become very fond of, when I think of Portland is the Pittsburgh of the West. And that's partly because of its bridges, its tunnels, its overall its terrain, and the engineering hub that the city represents.
And that I would say is an accurate description. And of course, you also have a lot of road history on its own too. Besides the bridges, but definitely it's definitely a lot of different little bits of history in this area.
Absolutely, and we'll be covering all of it, or we'll be trying to cover all of it as much as we can with our Portland webinar episode, which will be coming your way on next Saturday, March 12th. So we hope you can join us for that. So I don't know. That's about it for I-84. Doug, did you have anything you wanted to mention quickly before we sign off?
No, not that I could really think of.
Yeah, I mean, you talked basically nonstop for 2 hours, so why don't you go and get yourself a cup of tea or something?
Well, I have water. Actually, I'll be having dinner after this, so.
Or get some Marionberry wine or something.
Oh, the brewery's right. Not a brewery, the winery that makes is right in Salem. The Honeywood Brewery or something like that. I'd have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, but the winery it makes it's right in Salem.
Okay, cool.
Or Marionberry pie. That's another big thing. Basically, Berryberry pie or Tillamook, which is dairy and ice cream brand. They make Marionberry pie ice cream with it's vanilla ice cream with Marionberry pie pieces.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's something that now I have a craving for.
Now that you're talking about it.
Or you go to Sherry's, which is a chain in the it's kind of like a Denny's in the West. They sell different pies, and one that's a Marionberry pie. And if you're at the port, like you're flying from Portland, sometimes you'll see people bring Marionberry pies with them on the plane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I always look forward to you coming back from Oregon because it means you're probably bringing something Marionberry related with you.
Yeah.
So, all right, very cool.
All right.
And thank you Doug for taking some time out of your Oregon trip to join us today. This was a lot of fun.
All right, and if you haven't liked the video, like it.
Hit that like button, guys. I think that we have a pretty consistent audience here, but if you have not already subscribed to the channel, now's a good time to do that. And of course, we look forward to having you guys join us for our next live show, which will be back here next weekend to give you that. Yeah, I think that's about it for this show. So we're going to close up shop. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to seeing you next time. And from all of us here at Roadway Wiz headquarters in New York and in Doug headquarters out in Oregon, thank you all.
Or temporary headquarters.
Temporary headquarters. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
All right.